It started with the shadow. We were in the classroom that evening, trying to finish a lesson before it got too dark. The head teacher, Mr. Dyke, stood at the blackboard, writing something about history. My friend Ada nudged me and pointed. At first, I didn't see it. But then, as he moved his hand to write, his shadow stayed still for a second too long. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The light from the single lantern in the corner wasn't the best. But it happened again. And this time, the shadow didn't just lag, it shifted in a way that didn't match his movement. I didn't say anything. Who would believe me? I kept staring, waiting to see if it would happen again. It didn't. When the lesson ended, I ran home without looking back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the shadow and how wrong it looked. I told myself it was nothing. Shadows don't act strange. They can't. Or so I thought. Everyone knew something wasn't right about Mr. Dyke, but nobody said it out loud. The first time I heard anything strange, I was playing by the well with my younger brother. Two women were drawing water nearby, whispering so low I almost couldn't hear. Did you hear? 3 goats disappeared near the school, one said. The other woman shushed her. Hush. If you speak too much, you'll call trouble to yourself. I didn't understand what they meant, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next day at school, Ada told me something even weirder. My cousin said she saw Mr. Dyke walking into the forest after dark. But the next morning, he was already in the schoolyard like he never left, she said. Other kids started sharing stories too. One boy swore he saw Mr. Dyke walking barefoot near the market, even though everyone knew he was at school teaching that day. Another said his dog wouldn't go near Mr. Dyke. It felt like everyone was seeing something, but nobody wanted to be the one to ask questions. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted it to just be stories. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I saw in the classroom that evening, the shadow moving wrong, was connected to all of it. I told myself it was just my imagination. That's what I wanted to believe. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The night it happened, I didn't even do anything wrong. Ada, Uche, and I were kept back after school because someone talked during the lesson, and Mr. Dyke blamed all of us. He told us to clean the classroom as punishment. The sun was already setting when we finished. The school felt strange at night, too quiet. The lantern cast long shadows on the walls. Ada kept glancing over her shoulder. Do you hear that? She asked. At first, I didn't. But then I did. A soft scraping sound, like something being dragged. It was coming from the storage room. Uche, trying to act brave, said, "It's probably just rats." He walked over and pushed the door open. We all froze. Inside, there was a table covered with strange-looking papers, bottles filled with dark liquid, and a notebook with symbols I didn't recognize. Uche picked up the notebook and flipped through it. The markings didn't look like words, more like drawings that didn't make sense. Before we could look closer, a shadow fell across the doorway. Mr. Dyke was standing there. His face was calm, but his eyes looked like they didn't belong to him. Go home, he said quietly. Now. We didn't need to be told twice. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the notebook. Uche had slipped it into his bag before we ran out. The next day, he gave it to me. I don't want this, he said. You're the brave one. You figure it out. I wasn't brave, but I took it anyway. When I got home, I showed it to my older brother, Uche. He looked at the symbols and frowned. These aren't normal drawings, he said. They look like they're for some kind of ritual. I didn't know what that meant, but it didn't sound good. That night, I had a dream, or maybe it wasn't a dream. I woke up, and Mr. Dyke was standing at the foot of my bed. His face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel his eyes on me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. When I blinked, he was gone. I told Uche everything. He didn't laugh or tell me I was crazy. Instead, he said, "We need to put that notebook back. If he catches us with it, who knows what he'll do?" We waited until midnight. The village was silent, and the moonlight barely lit our path. When we got to the school, it looked even scarier than it had before. We crept inside, but as we got closer to the storage room, we heard voices. Not loud ones, whispers. The kind that make your skin crawl. We hid behind a desk and peeked around the corner. Mr. Dyke was there, pacing back and forth. He was holding something in his hands, something that looked like an animal skull. He was muttering words I couldn't understand, and the air felt heavy, like it was hard to breathe. "We need to leave," I whispered. But before we could move, he turned and looked straight at us. He didn't look surprised. It was like he had been expecting us. "You shouldn't be here," he said. But his voice didn't sound like him. It was deeper, colder. He started walking toward us, and I thought my heart would stop. Uche grabbed my hand and pulled me up. "Run," he shouted. But we didn't get far. Mr. Dyke raised his hand, and it felt like something invisible pushed us to the ground. "You think you can take what's mine?" he said. His eyes were glowing now, bright and unnatural. Uche reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden carving. It was an old family talisman our grandmother had given him. He held it up, and Mr. Dyke stepped back like he was afraid of it. The air around us felt lighter. Uche stood up, holding the carving in front of him like a shield. "Leave us alone," he said. Mr. Dyke growled, a sound no human should make, and then he was gone. Just gone. The next morning, we heard that Mr. Dyke had left the village. Nobody knew why. The school was shut down, and people said it was because of repairs, but we all knew the truth. Uche and I didn't talk about what happened, not even to each other. The notebook disappeared, and the storage room was emptied out. But sometimes, late at night, I still feel like I can hear whispers. And when I walk past the school, I don't look at the windows. I'm too scared of what I might see staring back.